In today's episode, we're unpacking a real client story where the bank says you simply can't borrow more. Our client, we'll call them Carl to keep things anonymous, wanted to invest in his fourth property but was roadblocked by one of the major banks. I'm Oliver from Insight to Buyers Agency, and I'm here with the one and only Jai from JD Capital, the mortgage broker who helped them get unstuck. We'll walk through their initial situation, what really held them back, what we did on the lending side, and how that translated into property we eventually bought without naming their name for privacy. All right, we're here down with Jai from JD Capital. Jai, welcome on board. Glad to have you here today. We're really going to unpack a really challenging client, or one of the, I'd say, quite intricate clients that you deal on a day-to-day basis. But before going in, tell us what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ollie. My name is Jai. I'm from JD Capital. So I'm a mortgage broker. I focus on lending for property investors, and we specialize in helping property investors grow and work very closely with you to go find the right asset so they can build their wealth long term.
So let's unpack. It's a very exciting story right now. We had a client, a mutual client, and again, for the purpose of keeping his privacy there, we've renamed him to client Carl. So Carl was coming into the conversation with, on my end, no banks would allow me to progress further. But he kept searching, and let's unpack what Carl's current situation was.
Yeah, so Kyle came to us actually with a decent position already. So he had his principal place of residence, and he also had 3 investment properties. So he had a decent portfolio. And his goal was to look at how do I expand and grow even further. And when you start to play in this space and you get to 4, 5 properties and beyond, it's really a game of finance, because you need to convince or get the lending from banks to go buy the assets, right? His issue was that he was stuck in a couple of ways. So he actually was asset rich, so a lot of equity in his properties. So with the 4 properties, including the principal place, I think he had about 1.3 million in equity, which is a lot. Most of the big banks wouldn't lend to him because he was already capped within the major banks. And most people would just go back to the same bank and just say, can I borrow more? And then they'll unfortunately say, sorry, you're already capped out. And they just assume that they can't borrow anymore. In Australia, there's so many lenders. You've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 banks that majority of people don't know, because property investors are a very small market. It's only like 20, 30% of the total Australian market. So what we were able to do was look at his portfolio. We realized that his properties were cross-securitised, and that's usually a big no-no when it comes to building your portfolio.
All right, let's stop there. So that was the first constraint that you identified, without even going in pair matching him with a tier 1 lender, a tier 2 lender, or a tier 3 lender. For our audience out there, what does this mean, and why is it a big no?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think if you start out, you wouldn't really understand what does cross-securitisation mean. And if you went through a bank, they probably would just tell you to cross-securitize, and you would just say, okay, just do whatever you need to do. All right. So cross-securitisation basically means you have more than one property tied together. It's a way of reducing the overall LVR between 2 properties. And it's good for the bank, obviously, because it's more security for them, right? But what it does do from a lending perspective is it ties your assets together, which makes it harder to pull equity out of one asset. So if you want to refinance, or if you want to sell one property, and if the LVR doesn't quite match under 80%, then you're going to be in trouble in terms of releasing that equity. That's the problem with Carl, was that he had properties that were crossed together, and he only had 40,000 in savings. So it would be quite difficult for him to go buy another property using purely just cash alone, right? We didn't really want him to use cash because he already had 4 properties which were draining him cash flow. So it didn't really make sense to use his hard-earned savings, right? So we wanted to look at a solution where he keeps his savings, keep building that buffer up, and then look for a lender that can allow us to release the equity from his existing properties and then scale from there.
And also with time of building his savings, a 40k savings into a delta of another 60k to get a 100k deposit, was going to take him another 2 years or so to get there, right? So that's interject of the equity was sitting in the portfolio that he had already purchased. The only issue is that he obviously went back to the bank. The bank just couldn't release that, right? And that's where you came in. So let's now unpack of, what you did, basically.
Yeah. So I think we had to kind of take one step backwards and then move 2 to 3 steps forward. The end result was really good because I think we managed to purchase 2 properties within 12 months, so quite a short period of time. But we did have to undo a couple of things, right? And I remember speaking to Carl and said, let's just be patient with the process, because he was like, when can we buy?
Absolutely.
He was chasing you and me going, Ollie, can we buy a property now? I said,
and I'm pretty sure from after this, he'll be chasing you particularly first to go, hey, when can I go for the next one? And I know he already has been doing so.
Yes, yeah. So he was patient with the process because I think he understood what was required to get to the end result. And I think he was very happy in the end. But basically what we needed to do was uncross the properties. We had to use, I think in the end we used around 3 banks. So it was a bit of a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 process to get to where we were. But uncrossing the properties allowed us to release equity. We released equity off 2 properties. So one was the PPOR, one was the existing investment property. From memory, I'll just have a quick look at my notes. We did manage to cash out a fair bit of equity from both the investment property and also the principal place. And they were using different banks, so tier 2 lenders and tier 3 lenders. So I'll just be very transparent. The tier 2 and tier 3 lenders are usually considered non-bank lenders. So non-bank lenders usually don't deposit money, so they're called non-banks, but their borrowing capacity and their serviceability is much stronger than a big bank, right? But it will carry higher rates. So when you have higher rates, it means your cost of lending and your repayments will be a bit higher, right? So we also need to manage cash flow. So that's the reason why we released more equity to have as a buffer. All right, so we did that, got him the equity and future-proofed him for another 2 investment properties. And we used lenders that allowed us to annualize his income, because in Carl's specific nuance with his income, he was in a job where he did quite a lot of overtime, and most lenders will look at what you earned as overtime in the previous year versus what you did in the current year. But some lenders are more conservative. We wanted to use a lender that can annualize his income, because his income was actually on a trajectory going up within the last 3 months, which was giving us a much stronger borrowing capacity, right? So that would mean he can then go buy those 2 assets with you.
So 2 things there, right? The first one was uncrossing the 2 homes. So what does that process look like?
It does require refinancing both properties. So the key to doing it well is to find banks that have a stronger valuation for both properties, because when they're crossed, the overall LVR is going to be higher. So what we wanted to do was make sure that both properties were under 80% LVR and have decent amount of equity. This is where it's very important to choose the right lender, because some lenders might have a more conservative valuation, some lenders might be a bit more aggressive. So if we can find a bank that is a bit more aggressive on the valuation side, we can bring it under 80%. And if there's a little bit of kitty left over, we can pull that equity up to 80% without any LMI.
And I think that's really one of the benefits of using a broker, but not any broker, an investment savvy broker who basically lives and breathes understanding policies, understanding lending scenarios, to be able to pair match the right lender to the right circumstance to what we're dealing with. Is this a fair statement to say? Is this what you do day in, day out, of matching lenders to right clients to the right circumstance so that they can get the best of both worlds?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I mentioned before, it's a game of finance, and every bank's lender policy is different. As an investor, you want to find the banks that are going to give you the best outcome. And the outcome is usually which banks can give me more equity, which banks can give me more borrowing capacity, because these 2 things will actually move the needle in your portfolio. The interest rate is give or take, 0.1%, 0.5%, 1%, 2% at most difference across, range of banks. It's that very small percentage is not going to make that much difference in your overall portfolio, but the lending will, right? Because that could mean another 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 properties. So stage 1 was to unlock the equity, uncross the properties, which we did. So that's stage 1.
And how long did that take?
That was probably about a month. Yeah, about a month long. And then as soon as we got that approved, we got a pre-approval with the next bank, right? And that's where Carl started to get excited, right? So he's like, Ollie, I've got my pre-approval now. I think we had a pre-approval up to around 600,000 at that time. This was going back to April. And yeah, do you want to go through the property details that you found him?
So particularly we then translated not just the first purchase, because what Jai equally does is not just focusing on the purchase in itself, but looks of what's beyond the next series of purchases. And the reason why that is so important, because it allows me, together with you, to then strategize in terms of what that property needs to be and what is going to be that stepping stone to allow us or the client to then leverage and move into the next property. So particularly in Carl's circumstances, the bulk of his investment properties were in WA, and we really wanted to then capitalize on the rising Melbourne market and position him very well. And as a result of that, what we did, we used a double-pronged strategy where we made sure the fundamentals of the market was in place, purchased well in a very quiet market. On market, right, it was no off-market purchase. On market, it was a 3x2 to then convert that to a 4x2. So effectively, we're buying a 3-bedroom asset at a 3-bedroom price. We purchased that well and truly below the pre-approval of 600 at 545. Went in, did the works of adding that 4th bedroom, and the works over 4th bedroom was about $12,000 with a few other bits and bobs of wear and tear and maintenance issues that we just upspec'd the property up a little bit. And that was his purchase for number 5.
Yeah,
right?
property 5. Yep.
Property 5. But then, once this property settled, Carl was excited. But we hand on heart knew that with the value add uplift work for a 4x2 at the time, we're setting just a little bit above that 600 mark in April of 2025. With the next purchase, which we were ready to go in terms from a pre-approval. So we want to talk a little bit more on that next purchase, Jai.
Yeah, so the next purchase after that, we had to use tier 3 bank, so the next level of bank, which will be even easier to borrow. But because the rates are getting higher as you go up the tier, so the bank that we used to purchase property 5 was around, I think, 6.5 to high 6s in terms of interest rate at that time, which is about 0.5% higher than a big bank. And then when we went to the tier 3 bank, the rates would have been up in the higher 7% range, right? So they can lend more, but they're more aggressive. We got a pre-approval of up to 700,000, but the requirement was to have a yield, of a minimum yield of 5%, right, to make the numbers work. And you were able to secure him the 6th property.
Correct. And that's where a conversation that we don't particularly look in isolation from this just yield requirement. Once you're building a property portfolio that size, your yield, your holding costs needs to be considered across the entire property portfolio size. So it was an honest discussion with Carl of going, hey, if we're projecting and modeling off a basis of a 5% yield, this is what the net holding position of your portfolio is going to be. At a risk perspective, are you happy that as a household income and an investment income, if he was happy to be able to carry that forward? And Carl was aggressive, he was passionate, he wanted to move the yield forward. At 7.29% interest rate was the cost of doing business to him. Right? He was happy to go in, find the right deal. And unfortunately, Melbourne was not going to be the market to be able to give him such a high yield. In this instance, higher yield being the yield that you needed to take finance off. And we landed up in northern tropical Queensland, being Cairns. Particularly up there, we got a 3x2 property with an added uplift of a larger value add that he will trigger later down the track of converting an outdoor carport into a 4th bedroom, which attaches down to a bit of a configuration to a laundry to make that into a bathroom. The beauty of that asset, it already had a swimming pool in there, and a 4x2 with a swimming pool, particularly in Cairns, is a very family established home with a strong owner-occupier market demand on that exit strategy. So that's what we ended up purchasing for him. Again, important point to note here, we haven't triggered that value add works, but it's one that we will be planning for, particularly at a point in time when the exit time frame is the right time for him to exit out. But also it might be one where at some point in time he might be restrained by serviceability, right? Tapped by income and having to just sit and wait for the market to do its thing. Whilst that happens, the equity is still in the offset account. That equity can then be utilised to do the uplift for that 4th bedroom, which what we'll do in the short term, it will definitely benefit the additional yield, which is then where you can come back in and rerun a serviceability or scenario across the 6 investment property portfolios and reassess whether he has a bit more to go into the tank. And that's where we've landed with Carl. And what I'm particularly excited is the type of assets that we choose always has an uplift potential. Whether you want to execute it at day of purchase, like we did for his 5th investment, or whether you really want to be buying the asset which has the potential, but to execute at a later point in time.
And I think you'll be very excited, Ollie, that the 2 purchases were only 4 months apart from each other.
Yeah.
So property 5 was in April, and then property 6 was in August.
Yep.
And before I got here, I actually ran the desktop valuations with a big bank.
Let's go.
So
moment of truth.
I'll start off with property 5 in Melbourne. I think it was West Melbourne.
Yep.
This one purchase price $544,000.
Yep.
And valuation came back at $640,000. So just under 100 grand. 100 grand uplift in how many months is that?
Just about 8 months.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the additional interest that he would have paid by using this bank, we're talking thousands of dollars, right? But he made a 100K uplift in equity, right? So the opportunity cost, right? This is where people don't see the difference, right? They're like, oh, I've got to pay 0.5% in rate. Why am I using a bank with a higher rate? Well, you've now got the opportunity to buy this asset.
Absolutely right. And that is in the market at the time, which was getting a lot of backlash of why investors.
Melbourne wasn't that popular yet, right? And then the last asset, the one in Cairns that you mentioned, purchase price $630,000 in August. Drum roll. Big bank val came back at $727,000.
Wow.
So again, almost 100 grand uplift. So he's made 200K uplift in around 7-8 months for 2 properties.
There we go.
Which is insane. Insane. He was stuck before.
I know.
And then he was able to go pull off another 2 properties with 200K uplift in less than 12 months time.
That's fantastic. And that's where I think for those watching how finance and property and the way how both you and I work together is it needs to work in as a holistic view of not just solely focus on a yield play or on a capital growth play, but really allowing him to keep progressing forward. Now, this usable equity, right, is now in your hands to look at how we can extract it out and keep going. And if he has the servicing power to keep doing, to be moving forward.
Yeah. Spot on.
So that was Carl's story. An investor with a blank saying no that could have easily boxed them in. By unpacking the assumptions behind the bank's numbers and tightening up the lending strategy with Jai at JD Capital, we could build a property brief that didn't just chase yield, but balance rent, growth, and future borrowing power. So if you're in a similar spot and you've got that big fat no from a bank, but you're not sure what it really allows you to do, I want you to take 2 conversations that's worth having. One with a broker like Jai, clarify your lending strategy, and one with us at Insight to Buyers Agency to translate that into a clear property plan. The links are in the description below if you'd like to book a chat. If this was helpful, hit a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's stuck in that pre-approval limbo or even in that finance roadblock. And who knows, you might be the next client story we share with our team.